So, welcome everyone to another panel discussion, the Global Healing Circle. And this week we have a special guest and a really amazing story. So, stick around. First, I'd like to introduce our panel regulars, which is Nora. If you'd like to just introduce yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Nora. I am an energy healer and a spiritual life coach. So basically, my job is to help you to release what you need to let go and to help you to build the life that you truly want to live.
And Amos.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amos Campbell. I'm a master healer from Peoria, Arizona. My business, Health and Healing Solutions, offers comprehensive health and healing options, ranging from massage to transcendental meditation.
And I'm Christina, and I'll be your host today. And I am a holistic well-being coach. I help women create the lives of their dreams through their mind, body, and soul. And I'd just like to introduce my friend, Shawna Ristic. And she has an amazing story of her near-death experience that we would love to have her share. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Shawna, and let's get into the story.
Okay, my name is Shawna Ristic. Hello, everyone. I am a massage therapist by training and intuitive healer in Santa Cruz, California. I have an office in Santa Cruz, and I also have an office, as we say, over the hill in Los Gatos, which is in Silicon Valley, where I work twice a week. And then I also do a lot of Zoom and phone sessions all over the world, where I help them basically figure out, or not figure out, but see where they're at and see what's coming up for them and what's really keeping them from connecting deeply into themselves and the true self, the truth of who they are. And then what needs to be released, and really how do we expand where the light is already is more my focus. And been doing that for 25 years now, since my opening began when I was 19 years old, and it was with a car accident. And that was my near-death experience. And when I came out of that near-death experience, I knew I was here to help people find their way home and heal, and to their true home. That is where they're actually, their essence is connected to, not just where your body is located.
Yes. And that is something that that sticks with me with any near-death experience story, because all of them talk about going home and this feeling of home. So I love that you bring that to people in this reality. So yes, please, we'd love to hear about your NDE and go for it. Yeah. So here comes.
Okay, well, I was working in bar. I was 19. I just graduated from high school. Well, when I was just before 18, and I had someone joining us. I had realized that I was going to school, and I hadn't really known why I was going to college, just because that's what they're supposed to do. And I was working as a bridal consultant in this bridal store just to make ends meet, and not making ends meet, and lost my job at some point, and ended up working in bars, in strip bars, and as a way to sort of make ends meet. And I was also modeling at the time. So it was a way to really kind of coming to terms a lot with my place in the world as a woman and what does it mean. And then after about a year of that, becoming really disillusioned about it all, and kind of really not so great of an experience with my opinion about other humans. And kind of got to the point where I was like, I said to a friend even, I know I came here for a reason, but I'm ready to go. This place is too hard. There's too much hardship here. I rethink my contract. And then I laughed it off. And then about a month or two later, I was on a trip with a client or the customer from the bar. I started taking trips with customers as a way to sort of travel inexpensively and start to try to check out other modeling industries in other parts of the country. And, insisting that it was all on the up and up. There was no funny business. He just wanted friendship. And then, once I got there and got into Atlanta where we were going, it was very clear that he had other intentions. And by the grace of God and the grace of this man, I was able to actually escape from that situation and without losing my dignity. And for what felt
I didn't know that part about your story. So thank you for sharing that.
I don't talk about it a lot, but
yeah,
it sort of gives, you had mentioned just the framework of what I came from. So I like to give a framework of where I was at in the position before this all went down. Even that night in the hotel room, as I kind of got out of his room and got back to mine, was laying in bed. I'm like, okay, I had another trip coming up with a customer on Christmas Day. That was, I was like, well, how far am I going to go with this? I am sure he's not on the up and up either. He's probably got other intentions that I'm not really wanting to go along with. What am I willing to do here? And something in me felt that if I really crossed that line, that sexual line, that it would be sort of soul damage. There would be a point of no return if I went down this rabbit hole, but wasn't really sure what to do and all of that. And so I fell asleep that night in the hotel room, pondering all of this. And then I thought, I don't know about you, but I think we all do this, where you imagine you're going to go somewhere and then you sort of like, I'm going to the grocery store. And then you kind of in your mind's eye see yourself driving to the grocery store, getting out, going to your groceries and coming back. Well, I couldn't see myself going to the airport for this Christmas Day trip. And I was like, why can't I even see that? I can't see myself going to Minnesota for the trip. I can't see myself even getting in the car, going to the airport, getting on the plane. Why can't I even imagine this? And I fell asleep pondering all of that. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I sat up and I was like, oh, I'm going to be in a car wreck and I'm going to be lucky if I survive. And then I was like, oh, self-fulfilling prophecy, don't think that way. You're going to, and I kind of pushed it all down. Well, then fast forward a few months about a month later, and Christmas Day, woke up, I was living with my parents at the time because I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do and get out of this bar life I was in. And wanting less responsibilities with overhead. And we did our Christmas thing, came downstairs, did gifts, did all that stuff. And then I went upstairs to take a nap while my parents and my brother left to go to my extended family. And when I woke up from my nap, I realized I was running late. So I quickly packed my bags really quick and I rushed out the door and drove through town, got up on the highway and thought, well, I need to call this guy and tell him I'm on my way. I'm going to be right on time, but I may be pushing it close. So I should let him know. And at that point, it was those big bag phones that plug into the cigarette lighter, those first time cell phones, not the ones that fit in your pocket.
Right. Yes.
And so I had to pick it up out of the floorboard of my passenger side of my car. And so I took off my seatbelt and I bent over. Well, I waited till I went over this bridge and passed this car. And then I was just about past the car and I bent over to pick up the cell phone and came up. And as I came up, I came close to hitting the car. So I swerved to miss. And then my car turned and I was going 75 and it nosedived into the median. And then I flipped over end across the median, which is about like 2 lanes of a highway. And then the next 2 lanes of the highway. And then they found me about 40 feet from the car turning blue. Miraculously, the car behind me was a nurse and the next car from the other direction was a nurse. So they were immediately on the scene. I don't remember any of that. I've kind of meditated on it and tried to go back into it and just had memories of sort of being out of body and seeing just very smoky, white, hazy stuff and also getting back in body and going, this is gone. There's nothing in here. It's just a dead meat suit,
Wow, that's fascinating.
and then just getting right back out, what else to do. And then the next memory I have, I mean, they ambulanced me to my hometown and then there was a trauma doctor there who was only there twice a month who happened to be there that day that could stabilize me. So they didn't have to spend the extra 30 minutes to drive me to the next hospital, which they said I probably wouldn't have made it. And then they life-flagged me by helicopter to a hospital in Kansas City where I spent about a month in a coma and then got transferred to a neurological hospital. And there they said it would be 4 to 6 months to rehab enough and that I shouldn't expect it. I told my parents, they didn't tell me this, but I would probably be mentally handicapped and, not ever to live on my own again or have I'd always need assistance. But I got out in 4 weeks, just on a
Wow.
cane.
Well, I just have a question before we get into the actual near-death experience. Going back to prior to the accident, where were you in your life as far as like spirituality? Did you have an awareness of something bigger and intuition? And were you studying any of that?
As a child, I was very connected to what my version of God. Nobody in my family was religious. I did go to church, to a Baptist church. I had them pick me up with the Sunday bus for a while when I was in like 2nd grade because I wanted to know about all this God stuff. And after about 3 months of it, I realized that wasn't my God. That's not the one I knew. And I remember finding things like God is love written all over the place when I was a kid. And so I wasn't religious, but I always had a lot of spiritual things happening. I grew up in a house that I thought was haunted, a lot of light beings and doors shutting and things cracking, until I sat down and told my parents the house is haunted, and they said, "Oh, this is just the overactive imagination of a child." And
Yeah.
I said, "You just wait, you'll see." And right when I said that, the doorbell started ringing by itself and the attic fan went off by itself. But my parents are very reasonable, rational, electrical engineer and IT person. And so of course the doorbell had a short in it and the attic fan just wasn't turned off all the way for them. That was the
Right. The
explanation. It
rationalization,
happened in that
right?
exact moment, right?
Yeah.
So I was spiritual. And then after that happened, not having the support of my family and and I was in Kansas in the Midwest, and there really wasn't anything besides atheism, scientism to religion, and not a lot in between. And none of that fit my experience. So I looked towards what I had as a help, which was the television. And that was the times of Freddy Krueger and The Exorcist. And I watched The Exorcist, found out that was supposed to be based on a true story, and that did me in. I was like, maybe that's what it says. And then I kind of developed this technique. This was my technique. I don't want to see this. 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 And it would go away. So I worked really hard to shut it down. But then I have to say that about the time before the accident, I was really feeling like I'd shut off a part of myself and was wanting to open that intuitive spiritual side back up. But I just was afraid. I didn't know how to handle it. And I was working, because of my profession at the time, was working in the bar industry with a lot of energies that were really heavy. There were really a lot of darkness, a lot of manipulation, a lot of dark, heavy, smoky stuff that made it really difficult for me to be able to be clear. And so that's where I was at, also wanting to open that back up. And boy, did I.
Yeah. Yes. Well, does anyone have any questions before we go into the actual story, before we move in?
Oh no, I want to hear this.
Okay. And I'd just like to introduce Fotini. Fotini, would you like to just share what you're doing and what you're up to?
Hello, my name is Fotini Kale. I'm from Athens, Greece. I'm a shamanic practitioner, a Paco, and trained to be a Pampa Mesayok. And I also train other people in the Indian shamanism. And I'm very happy to meet Shawna. Hi.
Fotini.
Yeah, so we'll just get into it.
Thank you.
So what I remember from that whole experience is, first thing I remember is kind of opening my eyes, and I was laying in a room on my back, big white lit room. I don't know if it was the hospital room. Everything was white and everything was bright and light. And there were 6 beings. There were 3 on each side standing there. And they were very tall, very luminescent, very light filled. They had kind of human shapes, but I don't remember like specific like bodies. Maybe they were angels. I don't remember wings, but they were very much, I call them light beings. They were just emanating nothing but divine love, and everything was okay. And they slid their hands underneath me and they lifted me up, and I was then standing in the room with them. And now that I've thought about it, because others have asked me, like, how big were they? I mean, I'm tall, I'm 6 foot tall, and we were all kind of the same height. So, I mean, we were all probably pretty tall. But they were just very emanating this light, and everything was okay. It was like somehow all of it didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered. Not that nothing mattered, it's just that everything was okay. And they embraced me, and it felt like, that's what I call home. It feels like coming back to family, but like real family without like all the baggage that we have on it here. Like love without all the conditions and the expectations that we have on it here. It's just generally it's okay, and you're loved. And actually lately I've been really exploring this idea with them on reciprocity, and that's a really great way to describe them. And I see this all with all of our guides. It's like they hold this emanation of love and appreciation and respect or held this for me, for each of us. And then when we receive that, and we're like, wow, thank you. that reception in turn gives back to them, and it creates this cycle of receptivity. You know, kind of like when you give someone a compliment, if they're like, "Wow, thanks," that
Mhm.
feels a lot better than, "Oh, thanks, you too." You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was just this receptivity in the room, and just this amazing gel of love. And they showed me what it is that I came to do. I don't remember it all. I wish I did. That's part of that amnesia thing that happens about being here. And what I'd done up to that point. And in that, I really saw and felt. I mean, everything happened telepathically, so it's sort of a download. But I really felt how my actions had made others feel. And the best way I can describe it is that that's what people are probably talking about when they talk about the judgment that happens. It's
Yes.
because you feel like, oh, that's what I did. Oh, and it's that we judge ourselves, so to speak. But it's when you realize all the ways when you were acting out of love, not
Mm.
in love, but outside of it, and how that affected others. And like it creates this contraction in the ethers and in people and in the space that almost becomes static. But when you act in love, it opens it and clears it. And so they showed me that. And then it was sort of like this discussion on what would be possible from here on out, what I had done up to this point and what we could do from here on out. And I didn't really want to come back. It was really nice over there. I was like, and then they showed me what would happen if I didn't come back, the ripples of that contraction that would be made throughout the world. It's like if you look out of a window of an airplane at the city at night, and there's all these lights that create like a matrix around, and that each of us is like a light. And if one light goes out, it creates like a power surge that dims and puts out lights all around it and even all over the globe. And that if I were to choose to leave, that would also create that as well. And then they showed me, how it would affect even the people close to me, like my family. And I saw like it would affect how my brother would be with women. Probably he may never marry at that point or be with a woman again because it would totally affect him.
Mm.
And they also then I also remember there were some times where I would actually come back into this side as a way to sort of rectify everything or sort of just to understand. And I remember looking from the corner of my hospital room down on my bed and my mom holding my hands and kind of leaning forward like this. And just the feeling of what was coming from her and thinking, wow, what did I do here? This big.
Mm.
I remember when I had told that friend, I was ready to go and I read my contract. I was like, yeah, people will be hurt and they'll get over it. I understood right then and there. You don't, it makes massive changes in the ripple of the ethers of the time space
Mm.
experience one. And so the next thing I remember is being like in a circle of these beings. There were, I think, around 12 of them, and they were all sitting in like a circle. And I was there at this point. I don't really remember having any communication with them. It was like they were debating whether I should go or stay. Or what do we do? Do we exchange? Do we do like a walk-in thing? Or do we just renege the whole thing and just not try to do anything anymore? Or am I going back? And then the next thing I remember is starting to come back. And at one point I remember opening my eyes and so I broke my chin off. I have metal plates in my face. And so I couldn't really talk, but I was laying on my side and I remember opening my eyes and my best friend was there, the one I remember of how I had made him feel and when I wasn't acting in love towards him. And I remember staring at him, wake up, wake up. He was sleeping and sitting next to me. And he woke up and he's like, Shawna, you're awake. And I kind of mumbled something and I think he understood. I wanted to know what happened. And he told me, and I don't remember what all he said, but what I remember was the awareness that love space was there in the room. It's here. It's the fabric that makes everything. It's like we all spring forward from that. And that's like the ethers. That's what's holding us all. And I looked at him and I could see it in his eyes. And you could see it in people's eyes, like right there in the eyes. It's the light. The light that I saw in those beings is right there in them too, him too, and in others, right? It's just sometimes we get so much filters over it because we get so far and so much shadow and contraction that we lose who we are, but it's there. It's there. And I realized that what I was experiencing on the other side is here too. It's just harder to see it, you know. So then I started coming back more and more. The last thing I really remember is from that hospital is they would strap me in these wheelchairs. And I always thought it was so ridiculous because my body was so stiff from being in a bed for, you know, a month. And I was always afraid that I was just going to slide like a board right out of the chair and they were just going to roll over me. But anyway, they had me strapped in this chair and they wheeled me down to PT and they had me strapped to these parallel bars. And I remember kind of halfway being in body going, this is really ridiculous. I'm like, you know, I mean, what are we doing with this body? You're trying to make me walk? And at that point, I couldn't even walk because I'd had toe drop. My toes were all on tippy toes. And anyway, it was really ridiculous. I'm kind of laughing at myself with all this. And then they put me back in the chair and they were wheeling me back to the room. And I remember as we're going down the hallway, I see another person coming in a wheelchair towards us. And I'm like, wow, look at her, man. What happened to her? She's really messed up. And as it got closer and closer, I realized it was a mirror.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. I really have done this, you know, and then I just got right back out of body and okay, it's enough of reality for a while. Reality. And then, you know, so after that, the next time I started really waking up was when they transferred me to the neurological hospital. I remember the ride in the ambulance a little bit. And then once they put me in, they had these like great little sardine can hot tub things where they strap you in a chair and they lift you up and they lower you in this little bubbly water and like a little sardine can. And that was from that point on, I started waking up. That was just the heat in the body and starting to wake up the body again. And then started really coming back. And fortunately, everything started coming back pretty quickly after that. I remembered how to feed myself pretty quickly. I started remembering people, you know, once someone would tell me something, it would stick. So, and then for probably the first 3 years after that, there would be these downloads of spirit. So it was really hard to come back integrating after an experience like that. Many of you, I'm sure, have had spiritually transformative experiences where you get blasted open and you just see the light and the beauty and everything. And then you walk around blissed out for like 3 days. And then the contraction happens. You know, you kind of come back to reality and the contraction happens and then it gets really hard to be here and there's a depression and that would happen a lot trying to stabilize this.
Did you have
There's been some.
Go ahead. Oh, did you have any feelings of like just depression or feeling like you wanted to go back there again? Like, what am I doing here? Feeling constricted in your body? Yeah.
It took probably about 7 years before I felt like I could fully get into even my legs.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And even another that 7 years also before I felt like I was creating something new and not just trying to put pieces back together. There was a serious depression that happened. Like I said, after that expansion, there'd be a contraction and I, you know, would I was driving again, going to school. I mean, I was back out on my own. I got out of the hospital in February and I was back on my own going to college in August. And would think about driving into the wall, but I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I mean, I can't do that. I'm kind of obligated to these beings to be here. I'm obligated to my family who did all this stuff for me. Really, they camped out at the hospital for a month, you know, trying to pull me through. I can't do that, but this place sucks. You know, it's so hard. But after a while, you know, then one of those openings would happen and it would remind me of what I had forgotten of the other side. And I'm like, okay, yeah, it's here, it's here, it's here. So that took a while to stabilize. And then, so one of the things that I did was automatic writing for that. So I couldn't really talk to anybody about this because of what I'd been through. Most people couldn't even take in. I couldn't talk about the woo-woo stuff because most people, when you talk about that, oh, these light beings, they just kind of glazed over, you know, oh yeah, you know. So I couldn't really talk about that. All I could talk about was this miraculous healing because people could take that in. So, and I couldn't really talk to anybody about, you know, these suicidal thoughts and stuff because it doesn't make sense. Everybody was just like, you should be so glad to be here. And I am. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, the grass, man, the first time I saw grass, just the way that vibrates with like vitality from the earth is so amazingly and beautiful. And it's in people too. But sometimes you don't see it. And sometimes that contraction's there. And it's really hard to only see the horrible ways that we treat each other and the
Yeah.
horrible things we do and all of that, the blindness. So I started journaling about it as a way to have some way to process all of that. And I would just go into like kind of a trance thing. I just start writing just whatever stream of consciousness, whatever comes out, whatever, feelings I was having. I don't know what to write, but here it goes. And then after a while, it just start automatically going. And then I'd stop after I'd finish and I'd read it and I'd realize something started answering my questions.
Mm.
And then I started working with that. And for probably a decade, for 10 years, that's what I did almost nightly just to cope with being here and handle it all. And that's how I started working with the council, as I call them, those light beings on this side. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And about that same time of starting the writing, I started noticing that there's a feeling to the yesness when they're guiding. There's an opening, an expansion, it kind of draws you into it. And that's a lot of the training that I work with, helping people become in touch with that now that you're familiar with, Christina.
Yes. Yes.
And so that opening and just sort of trying to follow that is what led me into meeting a woman who I was like, why am I miserable? I feel like I want to end this all. Why? I should be grateful to be here. And she's like, well, maybe you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. What's the chances of meeting someone who tells you that?
Mhm.
And so she suggested I go to check out this massage school. And I walked in and I was like, that's it. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And that began my path in healing. And I've
Mm.
been doing it for 20 something years now, 23 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, then when we moved to California, suddenly people told me, well, people want to hear about all this woo-woo stuff here. So you get to talk about it. And then it was all about trying to find vocabulary for it. And as I've done that, my relationship with the council has changed and shifted in many ways. And it's also deep in other ways. So that's the story.
Yes, that's fascinating. I love it. And I love how you say that we can achieve that. That's it, that love is here and we can achieve that. So, what are some of the ways that you help people achieve that in your work?
Say,
Yeah, I took your workshops to help develop my intuition that really catapulted to another level. And I still use the techniques. So, and I teach others the techniques too. So please share.
yeah, it's each person is where they're at, but it's really about an awareness. It's, we've all had those moments of presence where you feel like you're right here in the present moment and there's not the future, not the past, all with this mumbo jumbo in the mind stuff, but it's really like that falling back into like this receptive mind and out of this pushing forward, that we've all been taught is where reality is, or supposed to figure it out and push forward, falling back in that more receptive mind, and then allowing yourself to kind of drop into that presence state, because that's where your answers are and that's where the truth is. And once you can kind of fall back and let yourself fall into that, then you have more of an awareness of the guidance that's happening. And then you just notice in a nutshell, you just notice what expands you and draws you to it, and then what contracts you. And so like in my workshops, we spend the first one really getting to know your vibration and how you feel, because if you don't know how you feel, then it's very confusing on what's not you. Although, on a certain level, it's all you anyway, it's all one anyway, but we're most of us are pretty far from that space. And so noticing, then the second workshop was noticing how your vibration is with other people, so how other people affect you. And that's pretty interesting. If you just stay in your space, noticing that it bumps you, and then you get to choose how you want to be with it, instead of making it about what's wrong with them, why are they making me feel that way, or what's wrong with me for feeling that way. That's all just mind explanations, but it's all just information. And you can still be present and okay here even amidst that. And then the last workshop is your vibration and the non-physical, where we work with mostly people are interested in working with their ancestors who have passed, and especially with the tribe. And the tribe is all I've learned like my council, because the tribe is something that each of us has, this essence that you are, we'll call it this light that you are inside the truth of you. And like, let's for just a schematic to understand it. Like, let's say it comes from its own planet. And so many people are interested in working with their ancestors. And as I see that, that's like the biological lineage of your ancestors and ancestors and ancestors. But I'm also really interested in looking at what's your spirit line with if you think about it like your essence here, the light being that you are, and that it comes from a certain place, like, maybe think about it like a planet. And that only came to me as an awareness from a hypnotherapy session I received where I wanted to go home. And that there are beings like you that have agreed to accompany your spirit here throughout your journey on this path. And that they are often so close to us that we don't feel them separate than ourselves. But, we notice things like serendipities line up, things that help us, numbers, look at the clock and it says 1111, or I used to find random fortune cookie fortunes on the ground, Now I find random playing cards just on the street, little signs from my tribe that they're still there. And so I like to spend a lot of time with that. That's what I've come to know what I call my council as, is that tribe. And each of us has that they're accompanying us here. And then there's also guides, archangels and light beings and spirit guides, and that come in occasionally and throughout as well. That's what Workshop 3 does.
Yeah. So did you find these angels? Did you find this kind of afterwards, or did you have a knowing while you were on the other side that that all of this existed?
You mean the multiple layers?
Yes. Did you have an understanding on the other side that this is like there were other beings such as angels and archangels and guides and for everyone? And yeah.
Great question. Yeah, I think I did. I definitely recognize that it's not all homogenous, that there's my essence and that this was family and home essence for me, but that we each have our own unique tribe. It's like there's the oneness, all that is, that kind of separated out into its parts and into its parts and into its parts, and we're each a unique expression of that. And that while essentially everything is all one, and that's where we're all, as I've understood it, striving to return to, that there's multiple layers of that, before you hit the all-inclusive oneness. And
yes.
I think at some level I did understand that. And after this experience, my whole life became about what was that and how do I get back there? And, I went to France and lived for 4 years in my search for home, learned a lot there and learned a lot about finding home, but learned that it's all here, even have had clients coming and asking about the aliens and aren't they going to come and save us and all this stuff. And they were like, I don't know why you guys are all that's essentially what happens is we all sort of come through the space time to be here on this beautiful planet in an effort to, and we're these similar bodies, and also we don't freak each other out by how we really look, probably. and kind of commune together and try to work out our stuff here together, and for whatever reason each of us has come here.
Yeah.
So I think I did have an awareness that there's a multiplicity of it on the other side, but that's definitely deepened in my search since then.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah. Amos, did you have anything that you'd like to share or a question?
I just really like the parallels that she draws, and I really like a lot of her analogies. It's so amazing to see another seer aware and then to have these same experiences, because I've had so many parallels. I had a near-death experience at 19, all from a car accident, all from these things are so similar. And the way that the things have developed, the awareness of, like, she calls it the council and I call it the kinship, but they're the exact same string of people, whether you want to call it the tree of life or the Kabbalah, the Sephira and all the other things. These things are so similar across the board. So I'm just really interested in this whole journey and how, like, we've all known each other, but now to know another healer who's been called and has answered and is now growing and developing and spreading the roots across the web. I think it's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you say, Amos, about you had this experience at 19 as well. I have a theory that we used to have rites of passage ceremonies happen in our culture, and that we've kind of largely gotten rid of those, but that they still happen, but a lot of times they happen through trauma. And their 20s have some sort of awakening where they get to choose to awaken and move forward with that awakening into their adulthood and see what they do with
It
it.
seems to me, as a person who
Right.
studies anthropology, that is the common thread. Most, you see it from the bar mitzvah to the quinceañera to, it was called the vision quest, the spirit quest. You know, their young person is sent out on their own. Hopefully you have some type of awareness and then you bring it back. As I just finished past life regression, and what I'm finding is that it's a repeat and a repeat and a repeat and a repeat. And because we've actually done this so many times before in past lives, that it was actually something needed to reawaken or to remember the past before. So it's a needed spiritual catalyst, because you have to be shaken enough to get all the dirt off. I say you have to be broken so that the light can get in, is the best way that I put it. And this is a common thread, especially anthropologically.
Yeah, I
Yep.
think that's amazing. I would totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, though, like you say, that this had to happen and all of that, because, like, you know, when you go through something traumatic like that, you're like, what the hell just hit me? And then, you know, like 20 years later in my life, it's a chance happening where Spirit told me it's time for you to meet your husband's spiritual teacher, who he'd been working with and had an awakening and had been asked, given a spiritual name and asked to release to start teaching as well. And we come to meet him, and he asked me out of the blue, do you know anything about the near-death experience? And that unfolded this whole move to California. Like, who would have thought that 20 years later that would be the catalyst to move us here, right?
Yeah.
It's like it was planned. You know?
Well, that's the web. That's the web of weird, WYRD, and that's where the you know, the physicists call it string theory, the mystics call it fate.
Right.
You quantum threads, soul threads, you split it however you want, but then you share
All
the
the same thing.
stories, and the similarities are so striking. No, I find that fascinating.
Yeah. And I think something that you mentioned earlier about all being a part of this ether, like the ethers, and I've heard others talk about it as the fabric, like you're all part of the fabric, or yeah, the tapestry of existence. And that one little, if that one little piece is changed or is removed, then you actually have a break where it opens more. So I find that very interesting.
I call that the sequence. There are threads as a thread. However, in my opinion, strictly my opinion, healers are so impactful to other threads of fate. The examples here are like Kurt Cobain and Robin Williams. Maybe had some more healing happened, certain things may not have done. I know directly, had I not healed and got off of drugs, what would have definitely happened. There's sort of these threads. So when you heal, threads lengthen and strengthen and sometimes can change colors. And then healers, people who are designed or decide to take that path, become like sequins, and a couple more threads may pass through it than just a regular crossover. So if you actually pull out a sequin, it's more than just pulling a stitch. You will have a massive unraveling. So it's just an opinion.
Yeah. You know, I liken it to, are you guys familiar at all with Harold and the Purple Crayon?
Mm-hmm.
It's an old, like,
I love that book.
1940s
Loved
children's
it.
book.
Yeah.
But in the book, the story, Harold has a purple crayon, and he's going to go to the North Pole, for instance, and see Santa, but he's drawing this story. So it's of Harold drawing the story, and the story becomes real as he draws it. And I think of it as a good example of, here we are, we're drawing the story as a co-creator here on the fabric of the truth. And, you know, also the person who is actually writing the book is drawing it with us, you know, as the
Mm-hmm.
divine. So that's how I like to think of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like that.
Yes. And one of the stories that you had mentioned before, because you do get into, as part of your healing practice, you get into some other spirits that come in. And one of them was a famous, I don't want to say the name, but a male figure.
Oh, yeah.
If you recall,
I think I know what you're talking about.
starts with an R.
Oh, that one. Yeah. Rasputin.
Yes, yes. So I
Yeah.
don't know, real quick, if you want to just kind of go over that story and some.
Oh, yeah. I haven't thought about Rasputin in a while. I used to do a dance class that they had the Rasputin song in, and he was always like, "You need to think about me." Thanks for bringing him back up. I'm sure he's very glad about that.
Yeah, yeah, he
Yeah, there
must
was
He's
a
be.
my
moment where
favorite magician. Yes.
Mhm,
Yes.
and healer. There was a moment I didn't know a lot about Rasputin actually before meeting him on spirit side, and there was a moment where I had a client whose son was severely physically challenged, like wasn't able to hardly breathe on his own, and couldn't leave the house very easily, and had a lot of modifications, but really loved and was very much a wise soul, even with his limitations physically, which I saw were chosen to help him be able to stay in this love space and be the love. But anyway, she had called me to work with him because something was going, he was in the hospital or something was happening. And as I kind of sat to meditate and sort of dive into being there, I settled into my energy and then kind of let that go and go into the healing space. And then I kept seeing this dark hair. And I was like, and I also grew up, as the daughter of an engineer. So my mind's like, you're just making this up. You're just thinking of it. But, like, where does that thought come from anyway? Where does that dark haired guy come in? And so I kept seeing his dark, wavy, curly hair. And then as I kind of worked with it, I was like, okay, you're so present. I can't keep pushing you away trying to deal with this kiddo. What's up? And he kept coming in and coming in. And then he showed me, he told me his name was Rasputin. And I often don't get names because I doubt them too much. I think it's just my mind creating something. But yeah, we had this really nice experience of just this exchange of information and him wanting to share with me and show me some of the healings that are possible by using that frequency, which is, I tend to go more towards light and higher vibrational frequencies because I feel safer there. And his is a little bit more of a denser frequency, a little bit more shadowy. And so he was just showing me how, you can use that frequency as well with healing. So it's an interesting ride with him.
Yeah.
Amos, what's your experience with Rasputin?
I've always been fascinated as someone who I very much lean into the darkness of things. In my opinion, all the answers that we're still seeking are in the darkness somewhere. So I've just always been fascinated with the character. He's one of my favorite magicians historically. Aleister Crowley gets a lot of credit from the magical side, but Rasputin was a cooler character, and he has some of the more successful prophecies in his lifetime, and that's really where I like to hang out.
Yeah,
I've never done any type of work like that.
got it. I mean, but even talking about like the shadow need, it's like, so the way I see it is spirit kind of explained to me or the council explained to me at one time, they're like, okay, the old way of healing is to focus on where the contraction is or what's wrong and dive into it and try to dig around in it, and if you go to your doctor, that's what they do. If you go to your therapist, that's typically what they do, kind of rehash the story and dig in the wounds. But they were telling me that the new way of doing it isn't that. It's really going in where is their light, where is their expansion, and then focusing there to expand it even more. And it's kind of tying in with our new awareness of some of the law of attraction stuff about what you focus on is what you bring more of.
Mhm.
So I had been always kind of really trying to, the first decade I was focused on the contraction, and then I started moving towards okay, where's the light? How do we move into that? But what Rasputin was telling me was like, yeah, that light stuff is all fine and dandy and it does all matter, but there's wisdom in the darkness. There's wisdom in that, and that you have to dive into it to find that little speck of light that's in there, and then you can expand that.
Mm.
Whereas before that, I was like, okay, well, let's just ignore the darkness then, and let's just go to the light and just try to keep expanding and expanding. But he's like, no. It's like, Amos, I think you and I are like yin and yang here. And so like even in the yin, the dark area, there's the speck of light. And even in the yang, there's the speck of dark. So it's sort of that whole concept of what he was sharing is you dive into that shadow, but you don't have to stay and dig and get stuck in all the stories and the mind spin of the shadow. You dive into it to see the speck of light and then bring that forward.
Yes. I love that. And that is how, I mean, all of us, we have that ability to look at any situation that way. If you're in the middle of the muck, right? It's looking for that piece of light and focusing on that. Even if it's, as some law of attraction, coaches say, even if it's your pillow at the end of the night, how it feels so comfortable.
Right.
And feeling gratitude for it.
Well, and I think that what came to me when you were talking about that is the concept of kindness. Is that, we're so used to dropping into it was this cracking up. We're so used to dropping into the contraction, into the darkness, what's wrong with you and what I'm going to teach you what's wrong with you. I mean, look at war, like war is a great idea for bringing. Sure, that really works well. Creates a lot of trauma and a lot of contraction all over the planet, everybody. We hadn't learned any better, right? But when you come at it from kindness and you're like, what's the kindness to myself and to others? Then it changes it, you know? I think I was thinking of that because you're talking about experiences, and I was thinking about being at this coffee shop the other day. It was Easter, and there was nobody's open. And like if the health food store happened to be open in their coffee shop, and I think they put the one guy who was new was working by himself that day. And it was taking forever for anything. And this woman's like, you still haven't ordered? I'm like, nope, he looks like he's really busy making the smoothies for the people before me still. I can't believe. So she leaves and she comes back. I'm like, oh, you're back. And she's like, you still haven't ordered? Like, oh no, I've ordered now. And I'm sure whatever comes out of this is going to be really full of love and really well made. And it looks like the smoothies are coming out now. And then, then she's like, well, I'm just going to leave, and I'm like, I just can't believe that he's taking your order. Can't he take my order now? And I'm like, I think he's new. Jesus, you're kind. And then she leaves.
Aww. See, I want to split the hairs. I think that's more mercy.
What are you gonna do? I mean, you have a choice in this world, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
What's the alternative? What does that do to your mind? What does that do to your body? What does that do to the world around you? What kind of contractions are you creating in this space? They're completely
cortisol.
Exactly.
A lot of adrenaline.
And a lot of people.
And they stack, it turns out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I would like to say thank you so much. We're wrapping up here with time. And I just want to go around the room and just say or ask what last thoughts are, anything you want to take away from this that you can give to our audience. Fotini, do you want to start?
I was noticing the similarities with, even though you don't call it shamanism, but, like from the perspective of shamanism and how, you can explain different things. I was really, oh, yeah, I know this. Oh, yeah, I know this. I was all the time, I know this, I know this. It's very, very, this web of thing is how you can have even more things that you think at the beginning that you can have, and it includes way more. That's very, very interesting.
Yeah, it's all different definitions of the same thing.
Yeah. And Nora?
Well, this was definitely super interesting. Thank you very much, Shawna, for being here with us. And I will take, of course, a lot of stuff with me. I could also see and hear things that I already know, but it's really interesting to hear it from a person who actually has been at that side, because I have been reading a lot of stories, and in my healings, I sometimes get a lot of information about from spirits that are on that side, and I can feel that they are very much so full of love. Those spirits is very I can relate I experienced out of my healing sessions. And I actually share like one very interesting thing that happened in one healing session when I was healing a friend. Do we have time? 1 minute for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So basically, it kind of came to me now when you were saying about the web of the things and how we are all connected. And I was giving a healing session for a person I know, like actually my one of my surf teachers. And during that session, I was treating him, and it was like a long session. But I could see that when I was treating one of his chakras, there was a door, and I could see the door behind that door myself, like in one regression therapy. It was exactly the same black big door. And I was thinking, like, why does this door come here? Because I've been in there, like I know this thing. And I entered, and I went in a lifetime where I definitely wasn't a very nice person. I was kind of like borrowing money for people and getting a lot of interest and being like a very, very evil male figure in that life. And I actually ended up killed in that life in a marketplace. And I had to go back there because this guy had been one of the guys who killed me. And we kind of had to clear that out in that healing. And when you were saying that everything is connected and everything is like that we come back again, and we are kind of like just changing the roles, I was like thinking about this, that I wanted to bring it out, that sometimes we even have to bring them in the end in some sessions of healings with our clients.
Yeah.
And
Thank you. That's really, really beautiful story. And I had a similar situation with an old, like, first boyfriend who showed back up in my life 20 years later after I'm married with kid and all this stuff, and realized that we had this past life through a regression session I had done where he had killed me, or he hadn't killed me, but he had been a part of those that did, as I was the healer on the edge of the exiled one on the edge of the community in the forest and hung me. And yeah, sometimes I think you're right. It has to come into this life too, and to really find a way to heal. That's what I'm talking about, that contraction, to like untie the knot and heal the contraction. Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And Amos.
Well, my final thoughts is that kindness is magic. It's an energy that's created out of nowhere, other than sheer force of will, and it can be felt. So by sharing, every time you are kind to yourself, or you're kind to another human soul, or anything else, the plants or the animals, that is the most beautiful magic we as humans, besides cooperation, has ever created. So I want you to go today and be kind.
Yes.
Nice. And I would
that's when you're actually in the present self and channeling that love vibration. Just pure goodness.
Yes. And is there any final thing that you'd like to say, Shawna? I just like to thank you for sharing your story, a beautiful story, and what you're up to now. That would be how people.
It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed being with you guys. It was really, really fun. Thanks for the break in my day to play in some sunshine. Yeah, and I'm doing my workshops online. You can find information there. I'm about second. It's four different weekends of the workshop, and I'm just about halfway through the first workshop, which is kind of a prerequisite for the other two. But I may be gonna in June do a condensed version of it in just the whole month of June. So stay tuned for that. And then other than that, I'm working online and Zoom and phone and connecting with people that way.
Great. So and your website is
www.shawnaristic.com.
And we'll put that in the show description, your information and how people can get in touch with you. So thank you for being here today, and hope you found this just as interesting as we did. Please like and subscribe and comment below on even any suggestions of what you'd like to see more of. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful week. Bye.
Bye.